The scuff of worn leather boots against parched earth was the only sound for miles as Sophia Vargas trudged along the dusty trail, the weight of two empty water buckets pulling at her arms like anchors. The merciless Colorado sun beat down upon her back, but she kept her pace steady, knowing that turning back now would mean another day without clean water for her small homestead. This was her life, a daily 10-mile journey that had carved lines of determination into her young face that belied her 20 years. Colorado Territory, 1872. The West was still wild and untamed, with pockets of civilization scattered across vast stretches of wilderness. Sophia's family farm lay just outside the small settlement of Dry Creek, Colorado, a name that had proven all too prophetic when the local creek had dried to nothing but a memory 2 summers ago. The drought had driven many families away, back east to more hospitable lands. But the Vargas family had nowhere else to go. After her parents died of fever last winter, the small homestead became Sophia's sole responsibility. She was determined to keep her family's dream alive, even if it meant walking 10 miles every day to fetch water from the only reliable spring in the area. The path stretched before her like a serpent, twisting through rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. Sophia adjusted her faded cotton bonnet, a poor shield against the relentless sun. Her once vibrant blue dress had long since faded to a pale, dusty hue that matched the surrounding landscape. She paused briefly, allowing herself a small sip from the canteen at her hip, a luxury she permitted herself only once during each journey. As she rounded a bend in the trail, Sophia spotted something unusual in the distance, a horse and rider moving toward the spring, a rare sight in these parts. Travelers occasionally passed through, but few lingered in a place where water was more precious than gold. Sophia slowed her pace, watching the stranger with cautious interest. As they drew closer to each other, she could make out more details: a tall man astride a sturdy chestnut stallion, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The gleaming star pinned to his leather vest marked him as some kind of lawman. When they were within speaking distance, the man tipped his hat. "Afternoon, miss," he called, his voice carrying easily across the quiet landscape. "Good afternoon," Sophia replied, her voice guarded but polite. Strangers were to be treated with caution out here, badge or no badge. "Ethan Drake," he introduced himself, bringing his horse to a halt beside her. "Deputy Marshal out of Denver." Up close, Sophia could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps 25 or so, with clear blue eyes that stood out against his sun-weathered skin. A thin scar traced along his jawline, hinting at stories she couldn't begin to guess. "Sophia Vargas," she offered in return, shifting the empty buckets to one hand so she could shield her eyes from the sun as she looked up at him. "You're a long way from Denver, Deputy." His mouth quirked into a half-smile. "That I am, tracking a gang that's been hitting stagecoaches along the eastern route. Trail led me this way." He glanced at her empty buckets. "Long walk for water." 10 miles each way," Sophia acknowledged with a small shrug, as if the distance was of little consequence. "The well on my property dried up 2 years back. Spring's the closest water source now." Deputy Drake's brow furrowed. 10 miles every day." "Every day since the creek went dry," she confirmed. "I should be going. The day won't get any cooler." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on her with an expression she couldn't quite place: concern, perhaps, or something deeper. "I reckon I'll see you around then, Miss Vargas. Be safe." With that, he tipped his hat again and urged his horse forward, continuing on toward the spring. Sophia watched him go for a moment before resuming her journey, wondering what had brought a Denver lawman so far from his usual territory. The outlaws he mentioned must be particularly troublesome. By the time Sophia reached the spring, the sun had climbed higher in the sky and the heat had intensified. She was surprised to find Deputy Drake still there, his horse drinking from the clear pool while he studied the surrounding area with keen interest. "Something wrong, Deputy?" Sophia asked as she approached, setting her buckets down by the water's edge. He turned, seemingly unsurprised by her question. "Just curious about this spring. Seems like an important resource to have so far from town." "It's been here longer than anyone can remember," Sophia explained as she knelt to fill her buckets. "The local tribes considered it sacred ground. That's why no one ever built here despite the water." Drake nodded thoughtfully, watching as she carefully dipped the buckets into the crystal clear pool. "And you make this trip every day, alone? Who else would do it?" Sophia replied matter-of-factly, though the daily journey was taking its toll. Her hands, once soft and delicate, were now calloused and strong. Her shoulders ached constantly from carrying the heavy loads, but she had no choice. Without water, her small vegetable garden would wither, and the few chickens and goats she kept would perish. Drake was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Your family's farm, how far is it?" "About 10 miles that way." Sophia gestured toward the east with a slight incline of her head, her hands still busy with the buckets. "And you're there alone?" Sophia hesitated, suddenly wary of sharing too much information with a stranger, lawman or not. "I manage," she said carefully. Understanding seemed to flash across his face. "My apologies, Miss Vargas. Didn't mean to pry. Just seems a hard life for anyone to manage alone." "Life out here is hard for everyone," she replied, standing with her now filled buckets. The water sloshed precariously close to the rim as she adjusted her grip. "Even for Denver lawmen, I'd imagine." A genuine smile broke across his face then, transforming his serious features. "You've got me there." He moved forward, extending a hand toward the buckets. "May I help you with those, at least to your horse?" "I walked," Sophia said simply. His expression shifted to disbelief. "You carry these all the way back, 10 miles. "Every day," she repeated, already turning to begin her journey home. "Miss Vargas," Drake called after her. When she paused and looked back, he seemed to be wrestling with some internal decision. Finally, he said, "I'll be in these parts for a few days at least, tracking these outlaws. If you'll allow it, I'd like to call on you at your farm. Perhaps I might be of some assistance with your water situation." Sophia studied him for a long moment. There was something in his manner that inspired trust, despite her natural caution. "The Vargas homestead is about 2 miles east of Dry Creek. There's a fence post with a red cloth tied to it marking the turn from the main road." With that, she continued on her way, the weight of the water buckets already straining her arms. She didn't look back, but somehow she knew Deputy Drake's eyes followed her until she disappeared around the bend in the trail. The walk back always seemed twice as long as the journey to the spring. By the time Sophia's small homestead came into view, the afternoon was waning and her arms felt like lead. The modest cabin, with its weathered wooden walls and small porch, stood as a testament to her family's determination. Nearby, a small barn housed her goats and chickens, while a fenced garden plot showcased her ongoing battle against the arid conditions. After distributing water to her animals and carefully watering the most vulnerable plants in her garden, Sophia entered the cabin, placing the remaining bucket near the hearth. She moved to the window, gazing out at the vast expanse of land that surrounded her isolated home. Sometimes the loneliness was a physical ache, worse than the strain in her muscles from carrying the water. Her thoughts drifted to Deputy Drake. There was something compelling about him, not just his handsome features, but the quiet competence he exuded, the way his eyes seemed to really see her. Still, she reminded herself, he would soon move on, continuing his pursuit of outlaws, and she would remain here, walking her 10-mile journey each day. The next morning dawned clear and hot, promising another scorching day. Sophia was just finishing her modest breakfast when the sound of approaching hoofbeats caught her attention. Moving to the door, she peered out to see Deputy Drake riding toward her cabin, leading a second horse laden with what appeared to be tools and equipment. Curiosity piqued, Sophia stepped onto the porch as he drew near. "Deputy Drake," she greeted him, shielding her eyes from the early morning sun. "I didn't expect to see you so soon." He dismounted with easy grace, removing his hat as he approached the porch. "Miss Vargas, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all," Sophia replied, though she was conscious of her simple dress and hair hastily pinned up for the day's work. "What brings you here so early?" Drake gestured to the tools strapped to the second horse. "I've been thinking about your water situation. No one should have to walk 10 miles daily for something so essential." His eyes held a determined glint. "I'd like to try digging a well for you." Sophia stared at him in surprise. "A well, but the previous one dried up years ago." "That well was likely not deep enough," Drake explained. "I worked with a team of well diggers before I pinned on this badge. There's an art to finding water underground, and I think your property might have potential." I noticed signs yesterday as I was riding in. Hope flickered within Sophia, but she quickly tempered it with practicality. That's a generous offer, Deputy, but such work would take days, even weeks. Don't you have outlaws to chase? Those outlaws passed through this territory 3 days ago, according to the tracks I've been following. They're likely headed toward New Mexico now. He paused, then added, I've sent word to the marshal in Santa Fe. My conscience wouldn't let me leave knowing you're walking 20 miles round trip for water every day. Sophia hesitated, aware of how much a working well would change her life. Still, accepting help didn't come easily to her after so long on her own. I can't pay you for such work, she said finally. I'm not asking for payment, Drake replied softly, just the satisfaction of knowing I've done something worthwhile with my time. After a moment's consideration, Sophia nodded. Then I accept your kind offer, Deputy Drake, though I insist you at least let me provide meals while you work. His smile warmed her more than she cared to admit. That seems fair, and please call me Ethan. Ethan, she echoed, testing the name. Then you must call me Sophia. With that agreement, Ethan began unloading his equipment while Sophia retrieved her empty buckets for the day's water journey. You're still going for water? He asked, frowning as he noticed her preparations. The garden and animals need water today, she explained. Your well, if successful, is still days away from being useful. Then at least take my horse, Ethan insisted. She's gentle and will make your journey faster and easier. Sophia wanted to refuse to maintain her independence, but practicality won out. With a well being dug, she could use her time and energy more effectively elsewhere on the farm. Thank you, she said, accepting his offer. As she mounted his horse with practiced ease that spoke of her frontier upbringing, Ethan looked up at her with newfound appreciation. You handle yourself well in the saddle. My father taught me to ride before I could walk properly, she replied with a small smile, the first genuine one she'd offered him. I'll be back before midday. The ride to the spring and back was indeed much quicker on horseback, and Sophia returned to find Ethan had already mapped out the best location for the new well closer to the house than the old one, but in a spot where he believed the underground water table would be more accessible. Over the next several days, a routine developed. Sophia would tend to her chores and garden while Ethan worked tirelessly on the well. They would share meals together, first awkwardly, then with increasing comfort as they learned more about each other. She discovered he had grown up on a ranch in Wyoming before joining the U.S. Marshals 3 years ago. He learned that she had come to Colorado with her parents from Texas when she was 15, seeking a fresh start after drought had devastated their previous farm. On the third day, as they sat on her porch eating a simple dinner of rabbit stew, Ethan asked the question that had been on his mind since they'd met. Why didn't you leave after the creek dried up? Most others did. Sophia was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. This land is all I have left of my parents, she finally said. They poured everything they had into it, their dreams, their sweat, their last years. Leaving would feel like abandoning them somehow. Ethan nodded in understanding. Family legacy is a powerful tie. What about you? Sophia asked, turning to look at him directly. What drove you to become a marshal instead of staying on your family's ranch? A shadow passed over his features. The ranch isn't there anymore. Raiders came when I was 18. My parents didn't survive. His voice was steady but held an undercurrent of old pain. I tracked those men for months afterward. When I finally found them, a marshal was there too, pursuing them for other crimes. He helped me bring them to justice and afterward offered me a position. Said I had a natural talent for tracking. I'm sorry about your family, Sophia said softly, recognizing in him the same determination that drove her to preserve her own legacy. Their eyes met and held, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. For perhaps the first time since her parents' death, Sophia felt truly seen. As the days passed, the well grew deeper, and Ethan's presence became a comfortable constant in Sophia's life. She found herself watching him as he worked, admiring his strength and dedication. For his part, Ethan seemed to find reasons to be near the house when she was working outside, offering assistance or simply engaging her in conversation. On the seventh day, as Ethan was nearly 30 feet down into the well shaft he'd been digging, Sophia heard a shout of triumph echo up from below. Her heart leapt as she ran to the edge of the well. "Ethan," she called down, anxiety and hope warring in her voice. "Water," came the jubilant reply. "I've hit water, Sophia, and it's a strong vein." Tears sprang to Sophia's eyes as the significance of his words washed over her. No more 10-mile journeys, no more exhausting daily treks. Water right here on her property. When Ethan emerged from the well, his clothes were soaked and mud splattered, but his grin was radiant. Without thinking, Sophia threw her arms around him in a spontaneous embrace. He stiffened in surprise for only a moment before his arms encircled her, holding her close. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever repay you. Seeing you happy is payment enough," he replied softly, his breath warm against her hair. Realizing the impropriety of their embrace, Sophia stepped back, a blush coloring her cheeks. But the connection between them had shifted, deepened in ways neither could ignore. Over the next few days, they worked together to complete the well, building a sturdy structure around it and attaching a pulley system for drawing water. Ethan also constructed a basic irrigation system to channel water directly to her garden, an innovation that would save Sophia countless hours of labor. As the well neared completion, however, a growing tension settled between them. Neither mentioned it, but both were acutely aware that Ethan's reason for staying was coming to an end. Soon he would have no excuse to remain. The evening before the well was to be finished, they sat side by side on the porch steps, watching the stars emerge in the vast Colorado sky. The summer night was pleasantly cool after the day's heat, and the chirping of crickets provided a gentle backdrop to their conversation. "I received a telegram from my superior today," Ethan said after a comfortable silence. "The gang I was tracking has been apprehended in Santa Fe." "That's good news," Sophia replied, though her heart sank at the implication. "I suppose you'll be heading back to Denver soon." Ethan turned to look at her, his expression serious. "That's what I should do." "But," Sophia prompted, hearing the unspoken continuation in his tone. "But I find myself reluctant to leave," he admitted, his voice low. "These past days have been different from anything I've known since losing my family, working the land again, having purpose beyond chasing outlaws." He paused. "Being with you," Sophia's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan." "I know it's sudden," he continued quickly. "We've only known each other a short time, but I feel a connection to you, Sophia, to this place." He gestured to the land around them. "I'm not asking for promises, just permission to return, perhaps, to see where this might lead." Hope bloomed in Sophia's chest, bright and unexpected. "I would like that," she whispered. "Very much." Their eyes met in the dim light of the emerging stars, and slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Ethan leaned forward. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss that held both question and promise. Sophia responded with a tenderness that surprised even herself, her hand rising to rest against his chest where she could feel the steady beating of his heart. When they finally parted, Ethan's smile was soft with wonder. "I'll need to report to Denver," he said. "Tie up some loose ends, but I'll come back, Sophia, you have my word." "I'll be here," she promised. "The land isn't going anywhere, and neither am I." The next morning, they completed the well together, securing the final pieces of the structure that would change Sophia's life so dramatically. As Ethan prepared to leave, loading his remaining tools onto his horse, Sophia presented him with a small package wrapped in cloth. "For your journey," she explained as he unwrapped it to reveal freshly baked biscuits and a small jar of precious honey from her beehive. "Thank you," Ethan said, carefully securing the package in his saddlebag. "I should be back within 2 weeks if all goes well in Denver." "I'll be counting the days," Sophia admitted, no longer hiding the depth of her feelings. Their parting kiss was bittersweet, filled with both the promise of return and the pain of separation. As Ethan rode away, Sophia stood by her new well, watching until he disappeared from view. For the first time in years, the future held more promise than struggle. True to his word, Ethan returned exactly 14 days later, riding up to Sophia's farm just as the sun was beginning to set. She ran to meet him, her heart soaring at the sight of him dismounting with a broad smile that matched her own. "Welcome back," she said simply, though the words held volumes of meaning. "It's good to be back," Ethan replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "I have news." Over dinner, he explained that he had resigned his position as deputy marshal. "I've saved most of my earnings these past years," he told her. "Enough to make a fresh start. If you'll have me, I'd like to help you build this farm into something that would make your parents proud." Sophia studied him across the table, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "Are you certain this is what you want? The life of a farmer is very different from tracking outlaws across the territory." "I grew up on a ranch, remember?" Ethan reminded her with a warm smile. "This life is in my blood as much as yours, and—" He reached across the table to take her hand. "I've never been more certain of anything than I am of my feelings for you, Sophia." That night, as they sat on the porch looking up at the stars, Ethan formally asked permission to court her. Sophia's acceptance was immediate and heartfelt, sealing their understanding with a kiss that promised much more to come. The following week saw rapid changes to the Vargas homestead. With Ethan's help and knowledge, they expanded the irrigation system, repaired fencing, and added to the livestock. A neighboring farmer who had decided to move back east sold them 2 healthy milk cows at a fair price, and Ethan purchased additional chickens from the general store in Dry Creek. Word spread quickly about the transformation taking place at the old Vargas place, and neighbors who had previously had little interaction with the solitary young woman began to stop by, offering assistance or simply friendly conversation. Sophia found herself gradually becoming part of a community again, something she hadn't realized how desperately she'd missed. Ethan proved to be as skilled with farming as he had been with tracking outlaws. His knowledge of animal husbandry complemented Sophia's expertise with crops, and together they created a balanced operation that showed promising signs of prosperity. As summer gave way to fall, their courtship deepened. They spent evenings planning improvements to the farm, sharing stories of their pasts, and learning the intricate dance of 2 independent people building a life together. Ethan was patient and respectful, never pushing for more than Sophia was ready to give, though the attraction between them grew steadily more difficult to keep in proper bounds. On a crisp October evening, as they returned from a community harvest gathering in Dry Creek, Ethan guided their wagon to a stop at the top of the ridge overlooking their farm. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the land, highlighting the progress they'd made in just a few months: the extended garden, new fencing, additional structures, and the well that had started it all. "It's beautiful," Sophia said softly, taking in the view with pride and contentment. "It is," Ethan agreed, though when she turned to look at him, she found his gaze fixed not on the land but on her. "Sophia," he began, his voice suddenly serious. "I know we've only known each other a short time in the grand scheme of things, but I've never been more certain of my heart." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that caught the fading sunlight, a ring simple but beautiful with a small pearl set in silver. "I can't offer you riches or an easy life," Ethan continued, his blue eyes earnest. "But I can promise to work by your side every day, to cherish you above all others, and to build a future worthy of your parents' dreams and our own." He took a deep breath. "Sophia Vargas, will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man offering it. In the space of a few months, he had transformed not just her farm but her entire life, bringing light and love where there had been only duty and loneliness. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly, "Yes, Ethan Drake, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepened with the promise of their shared future, the passion they had kept carefully in check finding expression at last. They were married a month later in the small church in Dry Creek, with the whole community turning out to celebrate. The bride wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered and adorned with fresh flowers. The groom stood tall and proud in a new suit, his badge days behind him but his honor and strength evident in every line of his bearing. As winter settled over Colorado, the newlyweds found warmth and joy in their shared home. The well that had brought them together continued to provide life-giving water, never running dry even in the coldest months. Each night as they lay together in the quiet darkness, they whispered plans and dreams for the future they were building: children to raise, land to nurture, love to cherish. Spring arrived with renewed promise, the land awakening from its winter slumber. Sophia and Ethan worked side by side, planting crops, tending livestock, and continuing improvements to the homestead. Their harmony as working partners matched their devotion as husband and wife, each complementing the other's strengths. One warm May afternoon, as Sophia was tending to her expanding herb garden, she felt a peculiar sensation, a gentle fluttering within her abdomen that brought her hand to rest protectively over her midsection. She had suspected for several weeks, but had waited to be certain before sharing the news with Ethan. He found her there, kneeling among the fragrant herbs, a serene smile illuminating her face. "What is it?" he asked, helping her to her feet with gentle hands. "The well you dug has brought forth more life than we imagined," Sophia said softly, guiding his hand to rest against her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a child, Ethan, in the late autumn, I think." Joy transformed his features as understanding dawned. He gathered her carefully into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that expressed what words could not: gratitude, love, wonder at the miracle they had created together. That evening they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Ethan's arm protectively around Sophia's shoulders. "I was just passing through," he mused, wonder in his voice. "Following a trail that led me to a spring where I found you with your empty buckets. If those outlaws had taken a different route." "Perhaps it wasn't chance at all," Sophia suggested, leaning her head against his shoulder. "My mother always said God works in mysterious ways. Maybe he guided you here to this land, to our well." "To you," Ethan added softly, "the greatest blessing I never knew to seek." As darkness fell around them, they remained together on the porch of the home they had built through love and labor. The sound of water being drawn from their well by the evening breeze, a gentle reminder of where their journey together had begun. Summer progressed with abundant crops and increasing evidence of Sophia's pregnancy. Her slender frame now carried a noticeable roundness that Ethan regarded with equal parts pride and protective concern. Despite her condition, Sophia insisted on continuing to work alongside him, though she agreed to less strenuous tasks as her pregnancy advanced. Their happiness was marred only briefly when, in late July, a band of cattle rustlers targeted several farms in the area. The community, now more closely knit than in previous years, quickly organized a response. Ethan's experience as a lawman proved invaluable as he helped coordinate efforts to track and apprehend the thieves. When the rustlers were finally caught and turned over to the proper authorities, the incident had an unexpected consequence. It strengthened the bonds between the neighboring farms even further. A regular system of communication and mutual aid was established, with Ethan and Sophia's farm often serving as a central meeting point, thanks to its central location and reputation for hospitality. As autumn approached, they prepared not only for harvest but for the arrival of their child. A cradle that had been in Sophia's family for generations was brought down from the attic and lovingly refurbished by Ethan's skilled hands. Neighbors contributed baby clothes and practical advice, surrounding the expectant parents with community support that neither had experienced in years. On a crisp November evening, as the first snowfall of the season dusted the ground outside, Sophia's labor began. The midwife from Dry Creek was summoned, arriving just as the contractions intensified. Ethan, initially banished to the porch as was customary, soon found himself called back inside at Sophia's insistence. "I need him with me," she declared firmly to the midwife, who raised an eyebrow but did not object further. Through the long hours that followed, Ethan remained by his wife's side, supporting her through each wave of pain, whispering encouragement when her strength faltered, and marveling at her determination. As dawn broke over the eastern horizon, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, their son entered the world with a robust cry that filled the small cabin. "Samuel," Sophia whispered as the midwife placed the swaddled infant in her arms. "After my father." "Samuel Drake," Ethan agreed, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed down at his son's tiny face. "A strong name for a strong boy." The baby's eyes, still unfocused, seemed to seek out the sound of his father's voice. His small hand escaped the blanket, tiny fingers grasping reflexively when Ethan offered his much larger finger in response. "He has your chin," Sophia observed with a tired smile, "and I think he'll have your eyes too." Ethan pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, overwhelmed by the depth of his love for this woman who had given him a son, a home, and a purpose. "Thank you," he murmured against her skin. "For what?" she asked, looking up at him with exhausted but radiant eyes. "For everything," he replied simply. "For walking 10 miles for water that day, for allowing me to dig your well, for becoming my wife, for our son." Sophia's smile deepened as she shifted slightly to make room for him to sit beside her on the bed. "I should be thanking you. You changed everything when you rode into my life, Ethan Drake." Together, they marveled at their newborn son as the morning light strengthened, illuminating the start of a new chapter in their lives. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys to the Drake family. Their farm prospered. Growing from the struggling homestead, Sophia had maintained a loan to a respected and productive operation that provided not just for their needs, but allowed them to help others in the community. The well that Ethan had dug never failed them, providing reliable water even during the occasional dry spells that struck the region. Samuel grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quiet determination. When he was 3, he gained a sister, Elizabeth, named for Ethan's mother, who arrived during a summer thunderstorm that broke a month-long drought. Unlike her brother's dramatic entry into the world, Elizabeth's birth was relatively quick, catching even the experienced midwife by surprise with her eager arrival. "She's impatient to join the adventure," Ethan laughed as he held his daughter for the first time, her tiny face scrunched in indignation at being thrust so suddenly into the world. As the children grew, so did the community around them. Dry Creek, once a struggling settlement on the verge of abandonment, experienced a revival as new settlers arrived, drawn by reports of fertile land and dependable water sources. A proper school was established, and Sophia occasionally served as a substitute teacher when the regular schoolmarm was indisposed, passing on her love of learning to a new generation. Ethan's reputation as both a former lawman and a skilled farmer led to his election as town council member, a position he accepted with characteristic humility and dedication. Under his guidance, along with other forward-thinking residents, Dry Creek implemented irrigation improvements that benefited all the surrounding farms, using techniques similar to those he had first developed for Sophia's land. Through it all, the well remained a symbol of their beginning, the place where a chance encounter had led to a lifetime of love. Each morning, Sophia would draw water for the day's needs, often pausing to reflect on how different her life might have been without that fateful meeting at the spring 10 miles away. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Sophia with a special gift, a stone bench placed beside the well, engraved with their names and the date of their meeting. It became a favorite spot for family gatherings, the telling of stories, and quiet moments of reflection. "Do you ever miss it?" Sophia asked one evening as they sat on the bench, watching their children play in the yard. Samuel, now 9, was showing his 6-year-old sister how to lasso a fence post, his instructions serious and patient. "Miss what?" Ethan asked, his arm comfortably around her shoulders. The excitement, chasing outlaws across the territory, being a lawman. Ethan considered the question, his eyes tracking his son's careful demonstration. "Not for a moment," he replied honestly. "What I found here with you, with our children, with this land is worth more than any badge or adventure I might have had." Sophia leaned against him, content in the knowledge that their choice to build a life together had been the right one for both of them. "The day you offered to dig our well, I never imagined where it would lead." "Our well," Ethan echoed, emphasizing the word with a gentle squeeze of her shoulders. "I knew that day that I wanted to be part of your life, even if I couldn't quite admit it to myself yet." A shout of triumph interrupted their conversation as Elizabeth successfully lassoed the fence post on her 3rd attempt, her brother's proud encouragement ringing across the yard. Sophia and Ethan exchanged smiles, sharing in their children's joy. Life continued its steady rhythm as the seasons turned. The Drake farm became known throughout the region for its innovation and productivity. Ethan and Sophia welcomed two more children in the years that followed: twin boys, Michael and Joseph, born when Samuel was 12 and Elizabeth 9. The arrival of the twins presented new challenges and doubled the joy in their growing household. The well, which had started as a necessity, evolved into the heart of their farm. Ethan expanded it over the years, adding a more sophisticated pump system that allowed them to irrigate larger areas of their land. The water from their well helped not only their own crops but, during particularly dry seasons, was shared with neighboring farms, cementing the Drake family's reputation for generosity and community spirit. As their children grew, Sophia and Ethan made sure to pass on not just farming knowledge but the values that had guided their own lives: hard work, compassion, integrity, and the importance of family. They shared the story of their meeting often, emphasizing how a simple act of kindness, digging a well for a stranger, had changed both their lives immeasurably. "Your father could have continued on his way," Sophia would tell the children. "He had outlaws to chase and duties to fulfill. But he saw someone in need and chose to help, not knowing where that choice would lead. And your mother could have refused my help," Ethan would add. "She was fiercely independent and had managed on her own for a long time. But she had the courage to accept assistance when it was offered, which sometimes takes more strength than refusing it." These lessons took root in their children's hearts, shaping them into young people who looked for ways to help others and build community wherever they went. When Samuel turned 18, he announced his intention to attend college in Denver, the first in their family to pursue higher education. Though it meant he would be away from the farm, Sophia and Ethan supported his decision wholeheartedly, proud of the thoughtful young man he had become. "He has your sense of adventure," Sophia remarked as they watched their eldest son board the train that would take him to his new life in the city. "And your intelligence and determination," Ethan replied, his arm secure around her waist as the train pulled away from the station. Elizabeth, now 15, showed a remarkable talent for animal husbandry, particularly with horses. Under her care, the Drake farm began breeding and training horses that were sought after throughout the territory. The twins, at 12, were still finding their particular interests and talents, though both showed Ethan's mechanical aptitude and Sophia's love of reading. As they approached their 20th anniversary, Sophia and Ethan found themselves at the head of a thriving family enterprise, respected community members, and still deeply in love with each other. The hardships of their early years had forged a bond between them that only strengthened with time, each challenge faced together making their partnership more resilient. On the morning of their anniversary, Ethan woke before dawn and slipped quietly from their bed. Sophia stirred but didn't fully wake, accustomed to his occasional early risings. He dressed silently in the darkness and made his way outside, where the first hints of daylight were just beginning to lighten the eastern horizon. He walked purposefully to the well and stood beside it, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. The young lawman he had been seemed almost a stranger now, so thoroughly had he transformed into the husband, father, and farmer he had become. As the sun crested the horizon, casting long shadows across the land they had nurtured together, Ethan heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Sophia approaching, wrapped in a shawl against the morning chill, her dark hair now threaded with silver that caught the early light. "I woke and you were gone," she said simply, coming to stand beside him at the well. "I wanted to watch the sunrise from this spot today," Ethan explained, drawing her close. 20 years ago, I was just a passing lawman, and you were a young woman carrying water buckets 10 miles each day." Sophia smiled, the lines at the corners of her eyes deepening with the expression, "And now look at us." Together, they surveyed their property in the growing light, the substantial house that had evolved from Sophia's small cabin, the well-tended fields, the orchards they had planted, the barns and outbuildings that supported their diverse operations. In the distance, smoke rose from the chimney as Elizabeth, already up and tending to breakfast, prepared for the day. "We've built something remarkable here," Ethan said softly. "We have," Sophia agreed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Though I think the most remarkable thing we built isn't visible from here." Ethan looked down at her questioningly. "Our family," she explained, Our love, the legacy we'll leave for our children and their children after them. Ethan nodded, understanding completely. It all started with water, he mused. With your daily journey and my offer to dig a well. Perhaps, Sophia said thoughtfully, but I think it really started with two people who recognized something in each other, a shared understanding of what matters most in life. They stood together as the sun rose fully above the horizon, casting its golden light across the land they had transformed through years of shared labor and love. The well beside them, the catalyst for their life together, continued to provide not just water but a tangible reminder of how a single act of kindness could change the course of multiple lives. "Happy anniversary, my love," Ethan murmured, pressing a kiss to Sophia's temple. 20 years, she replied with wonder in her voice, and somehow it feels like we're just beginning. Hand in hand, they walked back to their home, where their children waited to celebrate the day with them. Behind them, the well stood as a testament to their journey from strangers brought together by necessity to partners bound by the deepest love. Its waters continuing to nourish the life they had built together in the once wild Colorado territory. As the years continued to pass, the Drake family became fixtures in the growing community that had once been the struggling settlement of Dry Creek. The town, now officially renamed Prosperity in recognition of its remarkable turnaround, had expanded to include a proper main street with businesses, a larger school, and even a small hospital where Elizabeth eventually worked after returning from nursing school in Denver. Samuel completed his education and returned to the area as a civil engineer, specializing in water management systems that benefited the entire region. His expertise, combined with the practical knowledge he had gained growing up on the farm, made him an invaluable resource as the territory developed. He married the daughter of the town's doctor, and they built their home on a portion of the original Drake property, carrying on the family legacy while adding their own chapter to the story. The twins, Michael and Joseph, took different paths but remained equally connected to their roots. Michael discovered a passion for carpentry and woodworking, establishing a successful furniture business that crafted pieces from locally sourced timber. Joseph, who had inherited Ethan's sense of justice along with his mechanical aptitude, became the town's sheriff, maintaining order with the same quiet competence his father had once displayed as a marshal. Through all the changes and growth, the original well remained at the heart of the Drake homestead. Though modernized and expanded over time, its fundamental structure, dug by Ethan's own hands in that fateful summer, continued to provide water for the farm. It became something of a local landmark, with Sophia and Ethan often sharing its story with visitors and new settlers, a tangible reminder of how small acts of kindness could lead to profound changes. As they entered their later years, Sophia and Ethan gradually transferred the day-to-day management of the farm to their children and grandchildren, though they remained actively involved in community affairs. Sophia, whose quiet strength had once been focused solely on survival, became a respected voice in local governance, advocating particularly for educational opportunities for girls and improved water access for all residents. Ethan, whose lawman days were long behind him, found a new purpose in mentoring young people, particularly those who had lost parents or faced other hardships. His experiences, both as an orphaned young man and as a father who had built a thriving family, gave him unique insight and empathy that made him a trusted advisor to many. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire community gathered to celebrate their remarkable journey. Tables were set up around the original well, now surrounded by gardens and shade trees that had been mere seedlings when Ethan first dug through the hard Colorado earth. 4 generations of Drakes were present: Sophia and Ethan, their 4 children with their spouses, 13 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren, with another expected within months. As the celebration reached its height, Samuel, now a distinguished man in his mid-40s with streaks of silver in his dark hair, called for attention. When the gathering quieted, he raised his glass in a toast. "To my parents," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd, "who taught us all that water isn't just necessary for life, it's often the beginning of something miraculous." 50 years ago, a young deputy marshal saw a woman carrying water buckets for 10 miles and decided to dig her a well. That well nourished not just crops and livestock, but a love that has sustained this family and this community for half a century. Murmurs of agreement and affection rippled through the crowd as glasses were raised. To Sophia and Ethan Drake, Samuel continued, whose story reminds us that the most important journeys often begin with a simple choice to help another person. May the well of your love continue to nourish us all for many years to come. To Sophia and Ethan, the gathering echoed, glasses lifting higher in salute. Seated at the center of the celebration, their hands clasped together as they had been countless times over the decades, Sophia and Ethan exchanged a look of profound understanding. The years had left their mark: silver hair, lined faces, bodies that moved more slowly than in their youth, but their eyes still held the same light when they looked at each other, a reflection of the love that had only deepened with time. "Did you ever imagine this?" Sophia asked softly, gesturing to the gathering around them. "When you first offered to dig my well," Ethan's smile was warm with memory and present joy. "I knew I wanted to ease your burden," he replied. "I couldn't have imagined how much my own life would be enriched in return." As twilight settled over the celebration, lanterns were lit around the property, casting a warm glow over the festivities that continued into the evening. Younger family members took turns drawing water from the original well, a tradition that had become part of family gatherings, marveling at how the simple act connected them to their beginnings. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, Sophia and Ethan found themselves once again alone beside their well, much as they had been on countless evenings throughout their married life. The sounds of their large family still echoed from the main house, but here in the growing darkness they had a moment of privacy. 50 years, Ethan mused, his arm around Sophia's shoulders as familiar and comforting as ever. It seems both an eternity and the blink of an eye. "The best kind of eternity," Sophia replied, leaning into his embrace. "One filled with love and purpose." Above them, stars emerged in the clear Colorado sky, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, and all the moments, large and small, that had comprised their shared life. The well beside them stood as it always had, a testament to the power of one person choosing to help another, and to the extraordinary journey that could unfold from such a simple beginning. "I love you, Sophia Drake," Ethan said softly, words he had spoken thousands of times over their years together, yet never without complete sincerity. "And I love you, Ethan Drake," she replied, the familiar exchange still carrying the wonder of their first declarations. "Thank you for my well and for every drop of happiness it has brought." Together, they made their way back to the house where their family waited, the living legacy of a journey that began when a young woman walking 10 miles for water daily met a cowboy who decided to dig her a well, neither of them knowing that they were taking the first steps toward a lifetime of shared love, purpose, and prosperity that would flow like water to nourish generations to come.